Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. That's audibletrial.com/nerdery and murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. That's betterhelp.com/nerdery and murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
2 years ago, I said I would talk about this. It's time. I just wanted to open with Jesus rides beside me. He never has any smokes.
All right, welcome to episode 104 of Nerdery and Murdery.
104, I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your murdery. Welcome to another week of the highs, the lows, the ups and the downs, the good, the bad, and the nerd and the murd. And Zig, I will let you take over with the nerdery side of the house.
Why, thank you, sir. For our 2-year anniversary, I'm going to go back to the first episode.
All right.
Episode 104 is 3 more albums by The Replacements.
Okay.
We're going to talk about Pleased to Meet Me, Don't Tell a Soul, and All Shook Down. I also kind of want to mention Dead Man's Pop, which was a compilation album they released just a couple of years ago, which had a re-recording of Don't Tell a Soul without all of the extra guitars on it. It's more like what they wanted. But mostly it's Don't Tell a Soul. The Replacements were an American rock band. Their early music, Sorry Ma, Forgot to Take Out the Trash, and Stink, were influenced by the American hardcore movement, like their contemporaries Husker Du. With later albums slowing down tempo, Bob Stinson left the band in 1986 and was later replaced by Slim Dunlap. The band broke up in 1991 due to internal tensions. And in 2006, the surviving members, without the original drummer, Chris Mars, and without Bob Stinson, who died in 1990, 1995, gathered together and recorded some new tracks for Replacements compilation. And on October 3rd, 2012, they announced the Replacements were active again. They were active for a couple of years and did some touring, but they didn't record anything. So in August of 1986, the Replacements either fired Bob Stinson from the band, which he had founded, or he chose to leave. Again, it kind of seems like it's a mutual decision. In either case, it was due to creative and personal differences between Stinson and the remainder of the band, aggravated by Stinson's alcohol and drug abuse issues. They also fired Peter Jesperson that same year. And Peter Jesperson said it was like being thrown out of a club that you helped start. Everybody was drinking and doing more drugs than they needed to. Bob Stinson preferred the louder, faster style of the band's early music, while Paul Westerberg was exploring new territory in ballads like Here Comes a Regular and Swingin' Party. The remaining Replacements carried on as a trio for Pleased to Meet Me, which is one of the bands or albums we're going to talk about, recorded in Memphis with big star producer Jim Dickinson. And then Minneapolis guitarist Slim Dunlap took over on lead guitars for the subsequent tour and soon became a full member of the band. The band's next album after that was Don't Tell a Soul. It was quieter and less punky affair, largely considered an attempt at mainstream success. While the move cost the Replacements the appreciation of some hardcore fans, the album had some notable songs such as Aching to Be and I'll Be You, the later of which topped the Billboard's modern rock charts. The band then made a second appearance on network television on the short-lived ABC program, International Rock Awards, for which they performed a typically energetic version of talent show. It caused a minor controversy when Westerberg responded to the network's censoring of the Feeling Good from the Pills We Took line, inserting an uncensored It's Too Late to Take Pills, We're Here, or Here We Go at the end of the song. The band appeared on the cover of Musicians magazine in February of 1989, in which it was described as the last best band of the 1980s. But there was trouble within the band following a disastrous tour opening for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Westerberg recorded a new album, largely with session musicians, but was persuaded to release it as a replacement of its album that was All Shook Down. It won critical praises and more mainstream attention with its debut single, Merry-Go-Round. It again topped the modern rock charts. However, this album's many guest players and Marr's quick departure from the band followed the album's release led many to wonder about the band's future. They also received a nomination for the Grammy Awards for Best Alternative Music Album. So let's talk about the albums specifically. Pleased to Meet Me is the only album recorded by the band as a trio. So Paul Westerberg, Chris Marrs, and Tommy Stinson. After their previous album, Tim, which we spoke about before, guitarist Bob Stinson was no longer in the band. Stinson was still a full member when the album's demos were recorded in August of '86. However, he only showed up for one recording session. The main recording session for the album took place at Ardent Studios in Memphis between November of 1986 and January of 1987, under the supervision of producer Jim Dickinson. Guitarist Bob Slim Dunlap joined the band soon after recording sessions. With the punk roots of the group were still apparent on Tim, by Pleased to Meet Me, there were more in the spirit as the band developed into other genres, such as soul and cocktail jazz, alongside tracks featuring the customary hard rocking sound, perhaps due to the album's recording in Soul Music Center, Memphis, Tennessee, and of the influence of producer Jim Dickinson. The band augmented its sound with saxophones of the tracks I Don't Know and Nightclub Jitters, and a full horn section on Can't Hardly Wait, which featured big star vocalist Alex Chilton on guitars. They even wrote a song in this album about Alex Chilton called Alex Chilton. Music video was made for The Ledge, but it was banned from airplay on MTV due to its lyrical content about suicide. Pleased to Meet Me was acclaimed by many critics Writing for Rolling Stone, David Fricke described it as an album alive with a crackle of conflicted emotions and kamikaze rock and roll fire. And in retrospective reviews, Stephen Thomas Erlewine of AllMusic felt that Pleased to Meet Me was the last time the Replacements could still shoot for the stars and seem like their scrappy selves. And in many ways, it was the last true Replacements album. The album appeared at number 3 on the Village Voice Paz and Jop Critics poll for 1987. And in 2012, Paste placed the record at number 70 on its list of the 80s best albums, or the 80 best albums of the 1980s. So the tracks are IOU, Alex Chilton, which was a hit, I Don't Know, Nightclub Jitters, The Ledge, which was an indie hit, Nevermind, Valentine, Shooting Dirty Pool, Red Red Wine, which was a cover, Skyway, and Can't Hardly Wait, which was also a hit. Did you give this one a listen?
Yeah, I gave them all. I gave them all a listen, but like I said, these are just not in my wheelhouse.
Not in
So
your wheelhouse. What did you think
no,
about Can't Hardly Wait? Did you like that one?
it was okay.
This is the one with the horns in it. How
Yeah, it
about
was okay.
Alex Chilton?
Like I said, they were all okay. Just none of them were really my genre of music.
Not gonna make it into your playlist, as it
No,
were.
no.
Okay. There two albums before Let It Be, which we've spoken about, attracted the attention of major record labels, and by late 1984, several had expressed an interest in signing their replacements. Financially, the band was not doing well. They were not selling enough records to recoup their expenses, and money from shows went to recording costs, hotels, travel, food, and instrument repairs. Bob Stinson worked a day job as a pizza cook. Twin Tone was not being paid reliably by distributors, and the sales of Let It Be were not high enough to justify extra promotion. At this point, they figured it was time for a major label contract, but often alienated label representative by intentionally performing badly in concerts. Their 1985 live album, The Shit Hits the Fan, great name for, or The Shit Hits the Fans, which is a great name for a live album, was an example of their concert performances at the time. Now, how this went down is it was a small show, like it was an old theater that they were recording it in, or actually that they were playing in. It had a balcony, but the balcony was mostly empty. And the sound engineer was just kind of walking around checking on, acoustics and stuff. And he came across this kid who was recording it on a cassette, on a cassette deck. So put his hand on the kid's shoulder and went, I'm going to need that tape. Kid gave him the tape and he took it back and they listened to it on their way to the next show. It wasn't a particularly good show. As the Replacements were known for having either the best show you've ever seen or the worst. There was no in between for them. They were either transcendent or not great at all. And they would play a bunch of covers in their shows. This particular kid's recording, because of the acoustics in the room and the balcony and how the kid had set up this tape recorder, again, just a tape recorder, was so good that the sound engineer realized he didn't have to clean it up very much and they could release it as a live album. So that's what they did. There's a point where the last song is cut off on The Shit Hits the Fans. That's where the sound engineer put his hand on the kid's shoulder. That's where that ends. But again, the sound engineer said in an interview, it was like everything lined up for that recording to be just perfect. And then Chris Mars started working on some artwork for the cassette. He basically took like a blank cassette label and just started doing some artwork, and that's the artwork that was on it. It was only released on cassette. You couldn't get it on record or CD, and I don't think they've released it since. You can go out and get The Shit Hits the Fans, but it is really hard to find. I have included some links to the Discog page for all of this stuff. One label, the Warner Brothers Records subsidiary, Sire Records, eventually signed the replacements. The band admired the label head, Seymour Stein, who had managed the Ramones, and Stein recruited Tommy Ramones as producer of their first major label album, Tim, again, which we've spoken about before. But this was all in lead up to Pleased to Meet Me, which was, again, highly acclaimed, and it had Alex Chilton on it, as well as Jim Dickinson. For the next album they recorded, what did you think about Pleased to Meet Me overall as an album?
Well, like I said, it's just not my wheelhouse. None of them are in my wheelhouse. So just continue on with your stuff.
Right on. Okay. All right. So Don't Tell a Soul was the first Replacements album featuring Bob Slim Dunlap, who replaced founding guitarist Bob Stinson in early 1987. The album was recorded at Cherokee Studios in Los Angeles and produced by Matt Wallace and the band. It was mixed by Chris Lord Alge, who decided to give the record a three-dimensional radio-ready sound. However, singer and guitarist Paul Westerberg was not satisfied with the new direction, commenting, "I thought the little things I'd cut in my basement were closer to what we actually wanted." Don't Tell a Soul was released on February 1st, 1989 by Sire Records. The song I'll Be You was released as a single. This proved to be the band's only appearance on the Billboard Hot 100. The song peaked at number 51 on May 13th, 1989 charts. So I'll Be You actually played on the regular radio. In 2008, the album was remastered and reissued by Rhino Entertainment with 7 additional tracks and liner notes by Pete Jesperson. And in September 2019, Rhino released Dead Man's Pop, a box set featuring a remixed and resequenced version of Don't Tell a Soul, said to be closer to the band's original intentions. Assembled by the album's producer Matt Wallace, along with rarities, demos, and other unreleased tracks. It includes 2 CD release of the 1989 live concert, released on vinyl as the complete Incarcerated Live. Don't Tell a Soul received generally favorable reviews, with critics noting the music's more mature themes and increasing disillusionment, along with a more primitive outlook, or more private outlook. Ira Robinson of Rolling Stone praised Westerberg's writing, stating that Don't Tell a Soul is full of his sharp-tongued wordplay and idiosyncratic musical structures. In February 1990, the album was ranked at number 16 in the Village Voice's 1989 Paz and Job Critics poll. The Smashing Pumpkins' James Iha named the song "Aching to Be" to his mixtape for Dreamers, commenting, "This is great because he's talking about a worldwide artist who's trying to do bigger stuff, and it sounded like someone everybody knows, like he or she is an artist, but nobody really takes them seriously." So he's talking about her. She danced alone in a nightclub. She's a poet. She's an artist. She's like a movie. But at the end of the song, he's like, "I'm like that too. I've been aching for a while, and I'm aching to be." The narrator reveals himself like, "I'm just like her, and I don't have the courage to go up to her. Maybe I read too much into it," laughed James Iha, "but that's how it reads to me." So the Smashing Pumpkins, or at least James Iha from the Smashing Pumpkins, was heavily influenced by Don't Tell a Soul. Don't Tell a Soul's tracks were Talent Show, Back to Back, Will Inherit the Earth, Aching to Be, They're Blind, Anywhere's Better Than Here, Asking Me Lies, I'll Be You, I Won't, Rock and Roll Ghost, and Darlin' One. Now, this song is also heavily influential on the alternative country sound. So a lot of those bands, like the Wilcos, like Uncle Tupelo, which eventually became mostly Wilco, the old 97s, were heavily influenced by this album. And you can hear that sort of alternative country sound here, especially in Aching to Be and Will Inherit the Earth, things like that. Anywhere is better than here. It's all really, it's got that heart to it, that Americana heart, sort of like some of the stuff that REM was doing at the time. Um, just just heart wrenching songs. Um, this is the period. This is basically where I kind of discovered him. Again, I had bought the Let It Be album just because I liked the album cover and it was cheap. Um, and this is what I was listening to when my friend Linda Rodriguez again um, said, "No, no, no, you need to quit listening to their poppier stuff. Listen to Tim and Let It Be." So I did, and that's really where I kind of got exposed to these guys pretty heavily. But um, "I'll Be You," I think, is still my favorite Replacement song, even though it's more of a poppy song. There's a line in there. Um, um, Lonely, it's where I'm from. And if I was from Canada, I guess I'd be called lonesome. Because in Canada, instead of saying I'm lonely, they say I'm lonesome. I just thought it was an amazing hook. I like that line more than anything else because it's it's not something that most people would think of. It's like, oh well, I'm lonely, and so I'm going to say it like this. He's like, well, I'm lonely, but if I were from Canada, I'd say I'm lonesome. I just love it. It's very quintessentially Paul Westerberg. Um, did you like Let It Be a little bit more? Or I'm sorry, Don't Tell Us All a little bit more than Please.
A little bit.
Yeah, I kind of
This
figured.
one, this wasn't bad.
Yeah, I kind of figured this would be more in your wheelhouse than Please
Yeah,
Send Me On.
I just didn't know I didn't know any of the songs previously though.
Oh, really?
Uh-uh.
I'll Be You is basically where I discovered this band.
Yeah, no, I didn't know
Um,
anything off of here.
and it's that one hook. It plays in my head all the time.
Hmm.
The next album is All Shook Down. All Shook Down is the seventh and final studio album by the American rock band The Replacements. The album was originally intended to be Paul Westerberg's solo album. His management talked him into doing a Replacements album before the recording started. And as a result of its initial intent, All Shook Down is marked by numerous sessions, side, and journeyman musicians, in addition to the three other replacements. Although there are no clear records on which members played on which tracks, there are numerous clues. In an interview with Music Magazine, Westerberg noted that there were four drummers on the record, but we'd bring in any guitar player, indicating that all of the guitar parts were performed by replacement members, but many of the drum parts were not. Replacement bassist Tommy Stinson joined the project only about a week after it started, and no bassists are included among the list of session musicians, indicating that Stinson played most of the bass on the records. Stinson has mentioned the songs I didn't play on, which may refer to songs like the title track uh, that did not feature a bass, or that Westerberg, who occasionally played six-string bass in the band's earlier recordings, may have played some bass in Stinson's place. But for the most part, it was Paul Westerberg and Tommy Stinson that were playing on it. And as a matter of fact, Tommy Stinson and Paul Westerberg are the only two members that reformed the band back in 2012 when they did a couple of years of touring. And they said they might get back together. Tommy Stinson kind of views Paul Westerberg as an older brother type. I mean, even though both men are in their 50s now. um, because when Bob started to pull away from all of the rest of them, Paul kind of stepped in to kind of help Tommy. Because again, at the time of the recordings of a lot of this stuff, Tommy Stinson was still in his mid to late teens. They started this band when he was 12 years old. Um, and they existed for, 10 years. So by the time the band was over, Tommy was only 23, you know, that's a lot. to go from, um, he ended up quitting school, to because they started making records. He had to. Um, so yeah. The Replacements drummer Chris Mars had brought in a cassette tape of his own material that he recorded on a 4-track. Mars had written songs for the Replacements before, but when Westerberg became the band's primary songwriter, he began to reject every song that Mars would bring in. While Westerberg dismissed the songs out of hand, Mars decided it was time for him to leave the band altogether. Chris Mars ended up having a minor indie hit with a song called Popular Creeps about the time All Shook Down was released. A lot of people think that Popular Creeps is basically a dig at Paul Westerberg.
Mm-hmm.
But it's pretty happy. I should probably put that in the YouTube playlist, because it's just basically, he only released like a 4-track album, and the only song of note on it is Popular Creeps. I might end up putting that in the YouTube playlist, because it's a pretty cool little track. A number of tracks also featured Stinson's backing vocals. Guitarist Slim Dunlap joined the project later and may have participated less than Stinson did, but it's notable that Westerberg kept Dunlap around to add guitar and vocal overdubs after Stinson and Mars finished their parts. And while the album has relatively few guitar leads, several songs featured Dunlap's distinctive lead style. Mars had already been replaced by session drummer Charlie Drayton on a few tracks before he arrived at the sessions, and the band used 2 other session drummers before its completion, indicating that his role was limited compared to the other band members. The only track featuring the entire band performing together may be the acoustic Rave Up Attitude. Of the other notable musician contributors included John Cale, formerly of the Velvet Underground, who plays viola on Sadly Beautiful, and Johnette Napolitano of Concrete Blonde, who duets with Westerberg on the song My Little Problem, which is why that song is so hauntingly beautiful, because it's got her just wailing on the background. The tracks for the album are Merry Go Round, One Wink at a Time, Nobody, Been Out of Shape, Sadly Beautiful, Someone Take the Wheel, When It Began, All Shook Down, Attitude, Happy Town, Torture, My Little Problem, and The Last. And Merry Go Round was, it made it to the top of the indie charts like 3 different weeks. Like, it was there. It didn't have a 3-week stint. It was the most popular song for a week. And then there was, I think, like a Depeche Mode song that was number 1. And then the next week it was Merry Go Round again. And then like another song, and then it was Merry Go Round again. But it did make the top of the, well, we call them the indie charts now, but the modern rock charts. The band issued a promotional only single called Merry Go Round, which they made an actual true video for. Someone Take the Wheel, When It Began, and Happy Town. Merry Go Round was the band's most successful modern rock track single, reaching number 1. Oh, I'm sorry, 4 non-consecutive weeks. I thought it was only 3. Drummer Chris Mars left the band in November of 1990. His last appearance as a replacement being in the Merry Go Round video. And Steve Foley filled in on the drums for 6 months. All Shook Down tour of 1991. The band were nominated for the Best Alternative Video and Best Special Effects categories at the 1991 MTV Music Video Awards. They used a lot of claymation in that video. It was really cool. And it was a mix between claymation and live action. The band played its last show on Independence Day, July 4th, 1991 at Chicago Grant Park. And it was the Taste of Chicago. Rolling Stone ranked the album number 3 on their albums of the year for 1990. The album was remastered and reissued by Rhino Entertainment on September 23rd, 2008, with 11 additional tracks and liner notes by Peter Jesperson, their former manager. The album cover art was taken in Newport, Kentucky, from the corner of 7th and Brighton Street, looking north towards Cincinnati, Ohio. It is a picture of two dogs in the street in black and white with the replacements all shook down. Real simple picture. It almost harkens back to Let It Be. Um, it was it was the last album that they released. And again, I can kind of see where this was mostly a Paul Westerberg album, because a couple of years later he released one, as well as helped the Goo Goo Dolls on their first major label album, and released a single on the Singles soundtrack, which was Dyslexic Heart, which is basically the most popular thing he's ever done because it was a hit. And then they recorded Dead Man's Pop, which was like the box set. It was released by Rhino Entertainment on September 27th, 2019. The box set includes a remix of the band's 1989 album, Don't Tell a Soul, which I have included on our YouTube playlist. I didn't record the whole Dead Man's Pop thing. I just included the Don't Tell a Soul recordings. I actually like them better because I agree with Paul Westerberg. I've seen it in a video. He always talks about how he really loved this album, Don't Tell a Soul, but he didn't like all the goop that Chris Lord Alge put on it. He refers to the extra guitar tracks and things as goop. If you listen to it without all that, it has that much more, again, alternative country feel, which is what he was going for, even with the big poppy hit that was on it. And it was all the stuff that was mixed by Matt Wallace. The band released a second track, the Bearsville recording of Aching to Be. The band's biographer, Bob Muir, received the Best Album Notes trophy at the 63rd Annual Grammy Awards in 2021 for the liner notes for Dead Man's Pop. And again, it's the same tracking that was Let It Be. It's the Matt Wallace mix as opposed to the Chris Lord Alge mix. But that's about it for the last three albums of the Replacements. Again, they're much more poppy than their earlier stuff, but it's not necessarily pop music. It's something more. I'm really surprised that some of this stuff didn't play on the adult contemporary stuff, because that's where Paul Westerberg stuff plays now. When he releases something, it goes into adult contemporary stuff, and you don't realize it's the same guy from the Replacements. But yeah, they were all trying to do something a little different from, Lay It Down Clown and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is where I kind of first discovered them. And again, I like all the poppy stuff. I like the punk stuff too, but I think I like this a little bit better. I kind of agree. Don't Tell a Soul, they shouldn't have put as many backing guitars on them. Yeah, it makes it a little more radio friendly, but it made it a little more radio friendly for 1989.
Mm-hmm.
It also makes that album sound dated. None of the rest of their stuff sounds dated. It doesn't sound like it was made at any particular time. That's what made them timeless. Don't Tell a Soul is the only one that sounds dated. Pleased to Meet Me sounds like it could have been made in 1965 or 6 weeks ago, the same with All Shook Down. But that's about it for the Replacements. Thank you for going on this 2-year journey with me.
Yep. No, thank you for taking us on another journey of another band. Second journey of another band. Like I said, this isn't much my music. Even though it was in the 80s, it just wasn't something that was in my wheelhouse, but I appreciate you taking us on that ride.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you. With that, we'll step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off Criminally Intrigued, Blurred by Lines, People, and Mamma Mia, and this is the story of Lawrence Singleton.
Lawrence Singleton.
So on September 29th, 1978, Berkeley, California, A 15-year-old girl named Mary Vincent stood alongside a few others hoping for a ride. Mary Vincent was just like any other teenager in 1978. She danced competitively and dreamt of traveling the world as a performer. Raised in fast and loose Las Vegas, she was the middle of 7 children in a military family. And according to a People article published 10 years later, she'd cut classes, wore makeup, and generally rebelled against her strict parents. Then came the day when Mary's sister warned her that their father was on his way home with a migraine and was angry with her. And hitchhiking was more common at the time, and many wouldn't think twice about getting a ride from a stranger. Her plan was to go to her grandfather's home in Corona, California. And after waiting for some time, a blue van approached the young girl and beckoned her over. An older man with a smile asked her where to, and she told him she was trying to make it to Los Angeles. He agreed to take her even though it was out of the way and motioned her into his van. Some of the other women waiting with Mary asked her to stay. The man gave off some odd vibes, but she felt confident in her ability to take care of herself. The man said he only had room in his empty van for 1 passenger, and the man seemed nice enough. She said in an interview on the television program Art Survived, "I wasn't a daredevil or anything. I just got desperate to get home. I could not live another day out alone. I did not think about what type of person he was or the situation. I was tired." The man was Lawrence Bernard Singleton in his early 50s and a former merchant seaman. Mary got into the car and the two were off to Southern California. Knowing just how long the trip could be, and sensing no immediate danger, Mary soon found herself falling asleep. It's not clear how long she drifted off to sleep, but when she awoke, she quickly realized that Larry was not going the route they agreed upon. He had missed an important turnoff. She became angry and insisted Larry turn the car around immediately. Larry seemed to shrug it off and claimed it to be an honest mistake as he started to look for a way to turn the car around. Once on the right path again, Larry decided to pull the car over, claiming he had to urinate. Once the van rolled to a stop, the two got out to stretch their legs. Mary noticed her shoelaces were undone, and she bent down to tie them. As she did so, Larry crept up behind her and struck her over the head with a hammer. He subdued the child and forced her to drink some unknown alcohol. He then drove further down a nearby canyon where Larry would continue his attack. Larry then tied her hands behind her back and brutally raped the girl repeatedly. The hours passed slowly, and terrified and exhausted and in searing pain, she pleaded with Singleton over and over through the ordeal. "Just set me free," she begged. "Please just set me free. I won't tell." Larry then decided the girl would be able to identify him and that she would have to die. Larry laid the girl on the side of the road, took out a hatchet, and began hacking away at the girl's arms. One can only imagine the agony and blind pain felt by Mary as the sadistic maniac removed both of her arms while she was still completely aware of her surroundings and fully conscious.
He cut her arms off while she was awake?
Yep.
With a blunt hatchet?
Yep.
Oh, God.
Once finished, he would send her down the canyon, stuffing her into a pipe where he would assume she would die shortly from blood loss. Shortly after the ordeal, Mary would lose consciousness and nearly die from her wounds. And it's hard to tell what was going on in Larry Singleton's mind before, during, and after the attack, how much of this was premeditated compared to being a split decision of mayhem. Had he jumped in his van that morning and knew he would perform such despicable deeds on a helpless victim? One thing is certain, when he finished everything, he thought he had gotten away with murder. Believing she was dead, Singleton threw her body off a cliff. Vincent landed 30 feet below in a concrete culvert off Interstate 5, but miraculously, Mary slowly began to come around. She had been left for dead, but she was strong. She fought off the urge to fall asleep and give in to death. She was also left nude, covered in her own blood, and she knew she needed to get out of the situation. She covered what was left of her arms in mud, packing it all down to effectively stop the bleeding, and she was able to make her way out of the ravine, and she was left in and started walking down the road with her arms raised, hoping this would help save what was left of her arms.
She probably saved her own life with that mud packing.
Uh-huh. One car approached but started to speed off in panic at the sight of the victim, but thankfully shortly thereafter 2 women were lost and came across Mary still staggering in the heat. They stopped, wrapped her in towels, and drove her to an airport where further help was contacted. Mary would go on to generate a detailed composite sketch and description of her attacker, in which would go on to be recognized by a neighbor of Larry's. He would be arrested and put on trial for his attack on Mary Vincent. 6 months later, Mary would be staring down her attacker in court, where her testimony successfully put him behind bars. She went on the stand and told the jury everything Singleton had done to her during those hours she was held captive. Unfortunately, he would only be sentenced to 14 years. The judge presiding over the court remarked, "If I had the power, I would send him to prison for the rest of his natural life." Larry would go on to stun absolutely no one by admitting he whispered the following to Mary while in court: "I'll finish this job if it takes me the rest of my life." Mary would go on to win a civil judgment of $2.56 million in a civil case against Singleton, but would be unable to collect because he had nothing to his name. Mary and the public were understandably upset over the sentence, feeling it too short and unjust, and this would lead to the passing of the Singleton Bill, which ceases the early release of criminals who used to torture their crimes and allowed for 25 to life sentences as well. One would think the story would wrap itself up here. Larry served his unjust but full sentence, and Mary was able to make a speedy recovery and lived a happy life. But sadly, this would not be the case. Mary faced multiple challenges as a direct result of her attack and suffered from both emotional and physical problems. She had trouble maintaining relationships, finding a job, and was unable to perform as a dancer, which was her passion prior to the event. She would become a devoted mother of 2 and an accomplished artist, and all this would help cope her with the pain, but will always have a constant reminder of the monster who offered her a ride that fateful day. Larry Singleton would only serve 8 years of the 14-year sentence based on his good behavior and performing his job well as a teacher's aide in prison. Just prior to being released, a psychiatrist stated the following, quote, "Because he is so out of touch with his hostility and anger, he remains an elevated threat to others' safety inside and outside prison." After being paroled, no town would allow the monster to live in their city, knowing what he was capable of doing to children. Crowds of people would gather and ensure there would be no place for Larry in their town. After unsuccessfully attempting to relocate him several times in different cities, Larry was finally allowed to live on the grounds of San Quentin in a trailer.
So even after he got out of prison, he still had to live in the prison.
Yep, basically, just on the prison grounds, yeah. Larry would eventually be allowed to move back to his native state of Florida, where he would continue to get in trouble. In 1990, he would be convicted of theft twice, serving a 60-day sentence. Both theft charges were for small, inexpensive objects. On February 19, 1997, in Tampa, Florida, a local house painter had noticed a horrific scene unfolding inside a nearby residence. He quickly called police and described to them the disturbing details. A nude man covered in blood was repeatedly stabbing a nude woman who lay motionless on a sofa. He would claim to the 911 caller that he could hear the bones being crunched after each stab, and the nude man who just continued on with his stabbing frenzy was none other than Larry Singleton.
Oh, no.
The victim was 31-year-old Roxanne Hayes. She was the mother of 3 and doing what she could to support her family, and she had agreed to meet with Larry for $20. Larry would go on to claim that she had tried to make more than the agreed-upon amount from his wallet, and a struggle ensued. While he was trying to get a knife from her, she wound up being stabbed multiple times, and his story is clearly made up due to testimony of the house painter. An unconscious victim cannot struggle with a killer.
That's right.
Shortly after the incident, Larry would attempt to take his own life, but was unsuccessful. He would be housed in a psychiatric hospital for some time before heading to jail to await trial. Mary would fly from California to Florida to testify on behalf of Roxanne and ensure this would never happen again. She would go into great detail what happened to her and paint a very clear picture why the ultimate punishment should be handed down to Singleton. She said, quote, "I was raped. I had my arms cut off. He used a hatchet. He left me to die." Singleton's defense claimed he never meant to kill Roxanne, that it was just a mistake due to too much emotion at the time, and it took the jury 4 hours to come to a decision of guilty. On April 14, 1998, Singleton was given a death sentence for the senseless and horrific murder of Roxanne Hayes. Singleton appeared not to care when Judge Anderson passed down the sentence on him, who said, quote, "This is an unprovoked, senseless killing of a human being. We are living in times worse than Sodom and Gomorrah." On December 28, 2001, Singleton was serving his sentence and awaiting his death when he died at the age of 74 from cancer. Many believe that Mary and Roxanne were not Larry Singleton's only victims, and he could be responsible for as many as a dozen murders. Today, Mary Vincent's art often portrays powerful women as female action figures. Some may be scantily clad, others fully clothed, but others are self-assured and ready to fight. Vincent learned how to improve her arms prosthetics using spare parts and now has a wider range of motion to better craft her illustrations, which she now sells. Though she's thriving now, it took many years of healing, both emotional and physical, to feel safe again after surviving what happened to her as a 15-year-old. When Singleton was released early from prison for good behavior, Vincent said the nightmares came back. On one occasion, she had even broken her own ribs from jolting awake during the night terrors. Mary Vincent says that whilst Lawrence Singleton's death did not grant her the peace she had hoped for, she said that the relief she saw wash over her sons' faces when they learned Singleton was gone for good may be just enough for her too. And that is the story of Lawrence Singleton.
Wow, what a piece of crap. Last week you said it's not going to be a good dude either.
Yes, right. I did promise it would not be another good dude, and I generally hold to my promises.
Yes, you delivered, sir.
Well, thank you for taking that journey with me.
Well, thank you, sir.
As always, we do appreciate all of our listeners. You can find more information on nerderymurdery.com as we end this recording week. There you can find links to the information we talked about as well as pictures. And you can also find the link to our YouTube.
That's right. We have YouTube playlists which have the nerdery subjects, different information, and in this case, a whole bunch of music that you can listen to, plus some other little clips and interviews and things like that.
Good times. Appreciate that.
Appreciate you.
You can also find the link to our merchandise, or if you wish to become to show off your nerdery murdery fandom, please do consider doing that. You can also find the link to our Patreon, or if you wish to become a patron to the show, help us with our costs. There are costs that are involved with keeping the show on the air, so please do consider doing that. There are bonuses that are associated with that as well.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And as always, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us, helps my dogs go off as they're going to do, right on time at the end. So please do consider leaving a 5-star review wherever you can. Helps us, helps keep our show going. And with that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your murdery.
Cue the music.